Greetings everyone and welcome to Spacing Out. I'm Jason McClellan.
And I'm Maureen Elsberry. Thanks for joining us.
Let's jump right into the news and get you caught up on some of the space and UFO stories that have made headlines recently. It seems like there's been a lot of talk lately about baptizing aliens, and we're going to talk about it again today. On Saturday, May 17th, Guy Consolmagno, an astronomer and planetary scientist at the Vatican Observatory, spoke to graduates at Georgetown University's commencement ceremony.
He began his speech by acknowledging that many are surprised to hear that the Vatican operates its own observatory. He explains that by supporting an observatory, the Vatican is reminding the world, including Catholics, that the Church supports and embraces science. He added, "We're not afraid of the truth, we actively seek it."
Consolmagno made headlines in 2010 when he told The Guardian, any entity, no matter how many tentacles it has a soul. He also told The Guardian that he would gladly baptize an extraterrestrial if one requested it. But during his speech at Georgetown, he announced there aren't any extraterrestrials, at least none that I know of. But he continued, and even if we do encounter them someday, it's going to be a long time before we can converse with them well enough to discuss the theology of the Trinity or something.
As we reported last week, Pope Francis also recently made comments about baptizing aliens, stating that Christians cannot close the door to all those who seek baptism, even if they are green men with a long nose and big ears like children draw.
The long-standing president of the World Chess Federation, or FIDE, is running for re-election. Kirsan Ilyumzhinov, who has led FIDE for 18 years, registered last week, making his entrance in the election official. But his opponent, former world champion Garry Kasparov, is determined to defeat the sitting president because he feels public comments about extraterrestrials made by Ilyumzhinov, who claims to be an alien abductee, are negatively affecting the Federation. Ilyumzhinov, who is a former president of the Russian Republic of Kalmykia, has been outspoken about his interaction with extraterrestrials.
In 2010, he publicly claimed to have met with extraterrestrials in Moscow, where he communicated with them, was shown around their spaceship, and was even taken into space. He asserts that he has been taken by extraterrestrials on multiple occasions, and he has spoken publicly about it for more than a decade.
And it's because of this that Kasparov thinks Ilyumzhinov is ill-suited to run FIDE. In fact, Kasparov has plainly stated that he believes Ilyumzhinov's extraterrestrial comments are a disaster for the organization. He also believes that Ilyumzhinov's extraterrestrial opinions are preventing FIDE from growing. The Guardian explains that he believes no Western sponsor will ever be with someone who is talking about aliens. In addition to his claims of personal contact with extraterrestrials, Ilyumzhinov believes that humans are a product of extraterrestrial intervention, and he asserts that chess was given to humans by these extraterrestrials.
The victor of the FIDE presidential election will be decided in August at the World Chess Olympiad in Norway.
KLAS investigative reporter George Knapp introduced the world to the top-secret military installation known as Area 51 when he interviewed Bob Lazar 25 years ago. On the anniversary of that interview, Knapp convinced Lazar to come to Las Vegas to discuss Area 51 again, and he even toured the Area 51 exhibit at the National Atomic Testing Museum.
In 1989, Lazar claimed he worked on reverse engineering alien technology at a secret facility known as S4 that was built into a mountainside just south of Area 51's main site. He alleges he was booted from working at Area 51 after it was discovered that he had leaked information to friends, informing them of where they could watch test flights of the advanced extraterrestrial technology which he was working on. Critics dismiss his claims, citing the lack of supporting evidence, including the lack of employment and education records. But Lazar, who asserts the government erased his records, stands by his claims.
The CIA only recently declassified Area 51, and at that time NBC News contacted Lazar for a statement. But he was less than impressed with the news. He commented, "That's a minuscule baby step forward. Maybe in a decade from now, they'll acknowledge there's an S4.
Although Lazar's story is the same 25 years after his initial interview with Knapp, he really doesn't care if anyone believes him or not. He is not trying to convince anyone, and he has tried to leave UFOs in the past. In the recent interview, he explains to Knapp, "Look, I'm not out there giving UFO lectures, producing tapes. This is not a business of mine. I'm trying to run a scientific business, and if I'm the UFO guy, it makes it really difficult. It is to my benefit that people don't believe the story." Lazar and his wife currently run a scientific equipment and supply store in Michigan called United Nuclear.
There is no questioning the extraterrestrial business at Area 51 in Lazar's mind. As he tells Knapp, "Look, I know what happened is true. There is no doubt, period.
Residents in the Heilongjiang province in China reported seeing 3 UFOs darting across the sky, and apparently one of them crashed into a man's vegetable garden.
According to ChinaNews.com, villagers in Mengcheng saw 3 objects falling from the sky on the morning of Friday, May 16th. Soon after, they heard a huge piercing sound, and a huge fireball came crashing down into a villager's vegetable garden.
What they found in the garden looks like it came straight out of a science fiction movie. It appears to be a large metal ball covered by a layer of jagged material. According to China Radio International, China Central Television News reports the object as being 2.5 feet wide and weighing nearly 90 pounds.
The area was secured by authorities, and an investigation began. Some villagers managed to take photos of the mysterious object. ChinaNews.com suggests that the object could be related to the failure of a Russian Proton-M rocket that occurred at about the same time. But the head of the Russian National Space Agency told Russia Today the rocket and cargo burned up in the atmosphere and should not have caused any damage on the ground.
However, according to an AFP report published on Monday, May 19th, investigators identified the strange object as debris from the failed rocket or the satellite it was carrying. Discovery News adds the spherical object in the photos taken by the villagers resembles a composite overwrap pressure vessel, or COPV.
Discovery News continues, COPVs are commonly used by spacecraft to store pressurized liquid fuel and are often constructed of steel or titanium and wrapped in Kevlar, the same material used for bulletproof vests. These objects are therefore very tough and can often survive the extreme heating of re-entry. And this is an interesting story that continues to make headlines. It was published by our friendly Spiegel at the Huffington Post, and that spurred even more headlines. But although this is very mysterious, I think it's most likely the case because we've seen this so many times in the past. And we've got a great article on openminds.tv that was written by Antonio Huneeus talking about these pressure vessels being found before. And one is in Mexico, and I know UFO researcher Jaime Maussan has one, and I've seen it personally in his restaurant down in Mexico. They are interesting, but they're big metal balls, and they certainly would look weird if you're in your vegetable garden and see it there.
Well, thank God it didn't hit anybody. I mean, these are big,
Massive
heavy things. Well, yeah, that's obliterated. You don't make it after that. But another interesting thing about this sighting, well, so in the video of the rocket, people are alleging that they believe they saw a UFO hit it and spurred the destruction of this rocket, which we hear all the time, but it's most likely actually a star in the background.
Yeah, I mean, there's not anything in that particular video to suggest that it's something mysterious or weird to say, oh, look, that object had something to do. There's so much in space, and that could have easily been a star, any number of things.
Right.
So to jump to that conclusion seems hasty to me. Something that stood out as bizarre with this story to me, though, is when you look at those photos, as you mentioned, I mean, this thing was hurling back to Earth. It's incredible that there wasn't some sort of crater or something there. It just seemed to be sitting there with no disruption to the ground.
You know what's funny is I didn't even think about that when I looked at that. That is funny. And we had, of course, a comment on the story that some guy said, well, that'd be an awfully small alien to fit in there, which is true. It's relatively small, 2 feet. But yeah, that is strange. No crater.
It is strange, and it's also strange. Another part of the mystery to this story is that the space agency came out and said, it wouldn't have been from the rocket because it would have all burned up. And then later investigators say, but it was.
I think they just didn't want to take blame for any.
Yeah, especially if one of the farmers is under there.
Yeah.
But yeah, some interesting elements to the story, but I do think that's the likely explanation for it. I want to talk about Bob Lazar. We haven't talked, I mean, we talked a while, I guess back last year.
Yeah.
We had our Summer of Bob Lazar with lots of news. Yeah, lots of news about Element 115 and the declassification of Area 51. This was very, very cool that George Knapp was able to convince him to come back and do an interview 25 years later. And some of the video, too, from that story of Bob going through the Area 51 exhibit at the museum was fun because there's stuff in there about Bob Lazar.
Yes, taking pictures of everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I liked how they presented this story because, of course, Bob Lazar is an extremely controversial thing where some people believe some of his story, none, everything else. And they had Stanton Friedman on there, who a lot of people credit for debunking Bob Lazar. And I liked one thing that Stanton said, because he says, look, I'm not saying that this guy is lying totally. I'm not saying that maybe part of his story isn't true. What I'm saying is, based on my research into his background, I cannot believe the story as presented, which I thought was very interesting. It's a nice way to kind of a safety net, sort of.
Safe way to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's controversial for sure. And, you know, I have my own reservations about his claims. But you know, some of the big things, and you and I have talked about this, some of the big things people cite to you as discrediting everything he says is the lack of proof for where he went to school, his educational records and things like that. Number one, it's not really that easy to get people's education records. Schools don't just hand that out to people. Number two, the fact that there aren't classmates or professors who remember him. I don't think any of my professors or classmates remember me, and I went to school much more recently than Bob Lazar did.
Yeah.
So I don't think those are smoking guns to say that he's full of crap. I do, however, find it most interesting that if he did, in fact, if he was a whistleblower, blowing this incredibly secret information of government projects and reverse engineering alien technology, why do they continue giving him contracts?
Right.
They wouldn't continue working with somebody who can't be trusted.
Yeah. Yeah, who knows? I liked in the interview too, he's just got that big advertisement for his store. I know that probably had something to do with why he finally agreed to do this interview with Matt.
I'll come and do your interview, but I get to wear my T-shirt.
Yeah, exactly.
United Nuclear. That's unitednuclear.com. I don't know if it is. It probably is. Well, anyway, that is all for this episode of Spacing Out. Remember to visit our website, openminds.tv, for all the latest news. And if you're a podcast listener, go to openminds.tv/radio and check out our podcast, Open Minds UFO Radio.
And if you enjoyed today's show, please click on the like button and subscribe to our channel so you know when we upload new content. Thanks again for joining us today. I'm Maureen Elsberry.
And I'm Jason McClellan. We will see you in the future.
If you have a UFO sighting or something you would like to report to Open Minds, you can go to our website at openminds.tv and click the contact button to send us your request. Or you can email us at contact@openminds.tv. You can also call us at 1-877-UFO-0110. That's 1-877-836-0110.